So hey everyone, it's just 2:32, so I guess I'll start off with the acknowledgement to country. So first and foremost, I'd like to pay my respects to both elders past, present, and emerging, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders with us today, especially those from, as was we're on the Gadigal and Bedjigal land, which Uniswap resides on. And yes, thank you all for coming, and welcome to an Adobe X BESA workshop on Photoshop. Just a few housekeeping rules. Please keep your microphones muted. Please feel free to follow us along with on Adobe Photoshop. And yes, use the Zoom chat box if you've got any questions. Just briefly on how the session will run, I'll obviously provide an introduction. We've got a Photoshop overview by Adobe Solution Consultants Steve, Brian, and Jane. We've got a take-home challenge that will follow straight after that, and we've got a dedicated Q&A session at the very end. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to the Adobe team. Steve, you want to take it away?
Wow, yes, for sure.
I'll share screen.
Yeah, no, I will share my screen, and hopefully you can, and make sure I get the right one. It's always a problem with multiple screens. So thank you very much, Charles, for organizing this, and just a bit of an idea of how we'll sort of roll through this. We'll talk about the exciting competition later, but we'll be walking through Photoshop. Jane will actually start off with showing Adobe Capture. So, you know, it's not just about Photoshop anymore. There's so many different elements to what Adobe has put together for images and imaging. So we'll be walking through, and I'll certainly be looking at some of the areas where you might use one application or another, depending on the actual project. Charles has been kind enough to share with me a few different types of documents that you might put together, and we'll certainly talk through, you know, some of the purposes of different applications for doing different things. So, you know, we've got these sorts of maps with overlays, and another example of a map with overlay, another almost completely line drawn image there. More of the architectural style mock-ups and things like that we'll be having a fair bit of fun with Photoshop, because there's actually no one way to achieve an effect, and there's no wrong way. It's just, if you like the effect, that's the one that we'll go with. So we'll work on a few different aspects, and probably do some things that you just didn't know that Photoshop has. And I know Brian's keen to show a few of the really cool vanishing point type functions as well. You know, looking at images like this, we'll do a bit of exploration of some of the interesting brushes that Photoshop has to help us through with some of these different projects, etc. So those are all what we're going to be looking at today. But what we'll do is kick off with Jane and just showing a little bit of a presentation of what Adobe Capture can do to help you with some of these projects. Over to you, Jane.
Hey everyone, hope you can hear me. And let me just share my screen. So I'm just going to get straight into the Adobe Capture app. So this is, you know, one of my favorite Adobe application. So, you know, Adobe Creative Cloud, not only the desktop applications such as Photoshop, you guys are pretty familiar with, but, you know, Adobe itself has a lot of, you know, applications that you can use on your phone. And Capture is one of those mobile specific applications that does not actually exist on desktop environment, but only exists in your mobile phone or tablet environment. And it is one of my favorite, really my favorite application. So a few things you could do with this. So, you know, Capture, what can we do with it? Let me just show you a few options here. So first of all, we open up, I mean, there's a few different menus items here. So one thing about shapes. So what does shapes do? So shapes to do is you can turn any image. So I've got an image right there. That's, if I look at if I, turn into color, it's actually image of trees, right? So any of image trees, and I can take an image of it, and it will turn into vector diagram. So what that means is you could actually use it later on in your Photoshop environment. You save into your libraries. So what I can do is I can crop this, to the bits that I wanted. Tree, let's see here. And I can, this is what I want. This is a tree I want. I might, straighten up a little bit, and I want to smooth it out. So smoothing takes a little bit of time, and the time it's taken is basically smoothing out the lines. So you get those vector diagrams. So if you got a digital, no, not digital, analog, like drawing on piece of paper, you're drawing of your architecture diagrams or your houses and so on, you can take a picture of it, and immediately it'll turn into a vector diagram where you can actually, use the import into Illustrator, making further changes, or do and then use it into other images that you've got. So I'm just gonna do this quickly. It's gonna, like I said, the smoothing function of it will take a little bit of time, but it's gonna make the output a lot nicer. So it's actually doing its work, the back end. Once you're happy with it, then obviously there's a crop, and there's also rubber and things that you can use to rub out bits that you don't want and the bits that you want. So any images, I'm just taking a picture of an image, right? But you can go outside, take an picture of a real tree, a real flower, a real house, and then it's going to turn into, beautiful looking vector diagrams. So let me just quickly get it. Hopefully it's done. Right. So she's a bit faster than that. It's okay. I'm just going to save it for now. So once it's saving it, you get to pick the, Creative Cloud now is very connected through libraries. So you can use save it into your Creative Library, where you can open it up in any of the applications that you've got on your desktop. Let me just, I think it's just taking time to smoothing out. Taking its time. And then yes, you could sketch a map. You can do a sketch in a rail map, and you can take a picture of it, and it'll turn to a vector diagram, and then it will smooth it out for you, and then you can use it later in your Illustrator and so on. Oh, I think I just lost it. Did I lost it? Back again. Where are we at? There you go. Let me just I think I took a picture. I won't smooth it this time, but you get the idea of it. Let me just quickly save this so we can use it later. Save this one here into. I wonder if it's my internet is not very good, but it works. Did this a million times before. I love it when your phone gets stuck. I'm not sure it's because I've got apps open. I'll come back to this in a minute. But there's also what you could do is not just black and white, but you can also take pictures of the image. Like earlier, you can do a picture, green. It will show. You can see it. It's actually in a effect where you can adjust how effect you want it to look like. So you probably can't see it clearly on the PC, but on your devices. But you could do this and change it, and then you can save this as well. Not sure why the saving is not the best today. I think it's probably the internet. All right. Oh, finally lets me save it. Oh, good. Okay, cool. So that's And that's one thing you could do. And the other things you could do is colors. So what's good about colors is if you see, a building, or when you go outside, to wherever you are, if you see beautiful colors that you like, for example, images, I've got a few images here that you might like the color of it, the sky, and so on. Then what this can do, it can capture the colors and save it as your color palette and into your library. So I can just take a picture. It can come from any picture. It could be a picture from your camera roll, or there's great ingredients, color qualities, and so on. So you can look at the harmonious colors and you can look at the image. So this is the image I took, automatically picks up these spots of colors, but I might move those little dots to pick up additional, to pick up the colors that I wanted to have with these images. So you have saved these swatches that you can use later on in your own color, in your own color, your own artwork later. So you can save this. Again, this is a great gradient. I saved it, but you can save the swatches as well. So these are the things you can use. And there's other things you could use is type. So for example, what's type? How Adobe has a lot of fonts that you could download and use through your application as well. What you could do is, if you see a font that you like, signage, so on, you don't know what font it is, but you want to use it, you could simply take a picture of it. So I could, I've got a box up here, then I can go, right, I wanted to know what font they use on this package. And you just move this here to say, right, I wanted to know what font this is. And then you just take a picture. And it's going to go to the Adobe font library. I think my lighting here is probably the best, but you'll find the closest font to the font that you're putting your picture of, okay? And then and then you can see, and you can save this into your, for example, your library, and you can use it later. I think it's just the lighting in my room that you don't get the exact font, but when you take, a good lighting environment, if you take a picture of the font, it's going to go find that font in the Adobe font library, and then you can save it again in your library to use it. And a few other things you could do is, this one I really like is look. So look is basically saying, hey, I love the look of this picture, the color scheme, it's like taking a picture of the color scheme of this picture, and then you can apply this color scheme to any other images you're going to manipulate later. So for example, this is just the example file they give you. So if I hold, so this is the original, what the picture looks like, and this is the, I think in your share screen you might not see this, is it's like taking, capturing a filter. So I've captured this filter. So it says my internet connection is unstable. So I've captured a filter, and then I can actually see before and after. I think you might not see the before and after, you only see the after at the moment. But I'll show you what that means in a minute in Photoshop. I can save the look of this filter, and I'll just do another one here, for example. Then you can see a difference is here. I've got another one that's, I love the color scheme of this. And then I can apply this filter. I can save this filter here, and this is the look I want. If like sunset and so on, if you go for a walk on sunset or sunrise, so you take a picture of the environment, you can keep that filter and you can apply it to images later, and I'll show you how you do that in Photoshop in a minute. And other things you could do is patterns. So based on the images you've got, like, doesn't matter where how I'm pointing my camera to, I'm just pointing to my screen, but if I come to my keyboard, it can create all types of patterns for me. So I can move around the different, I can different shapes. Okay, so you can't actually tell, actually, I'm just pointing to some keyboard in that app. It's actually creating patterns based on what I'm, what my camera is pointing at. So you can create beautiful patterns, whether it's colored, or you can have grayscale, or just black and white, okay, into patterns that you might want to use in your design. Okay, so, I love this pattern, I want to use it, and I can save it into my, once again, into my demo library. So I actually create a library folder for, things, a project I do, and then everything you collect can be put in that folder. And then later when you go to Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign or any of the other apps, you can access those files immediately, like immediately because it gets synced quite quickly. So let me just do, there's other ones you could do. And now you can see my assets. I've got all the things I took a picture of before. Is the other one is material. So what is material? So we've got an application called Adobe Dimension, which is a 3D modeling, sort of, a 2D modeling tool that based on 3D objects. For example, you can create an object of a mug, and you want to design or a leather bag, you can design it and you can apply the materials to that specific object to reflect, that object. So if I take a picture of the, my home floorboards, then I can actually create a material of floorboards. So when I go to my Adobe Dimension, I can apply that to the object or to the floorboard that I'm creating. So for example, I know you guys are using SketchUp, right, to do some of the architectural design. When you export those 3D models out into a 3D model format that's supported by Dimension, you can import those models into Dimension and apply those materials onto these objects or your floorboards. So if you designing, you want to know what the floorboard might look like on this one, or a carpet, or any of the steel and things, then you can have your own materials applied to the model, if that makes sense. So I'll just do one more thing. I just want to try that tree again because I think my internet is better. I just want to take a picture of the tree that's black and white so I can show you what that looks like in a minute. I think it'll be very quick this time around. It's again, I think, okay. Usually, smoothing is like pretty quick. It's not as slow as it has been. But I might just do that. I'll just save it anyway, so in case it takes a bit of time. So once you've done that, so Capture is really capturing everything that you see that you like and you want to use into a project, okay? And it's very, very powerful. And this is one of the best apps that in the Adobe application that's available on mobile. I recommend you to have a look and then try use it. So now if I go back to my Zoom, and I'll stop share my phone here, and then I will share on my desktop. Okay. Okay, everyone see my Photoshop opened? So we've taken pictures of this. I assume you can see my desktop, yes?
Yeah, it hasn't popped up.
Oh, it hasn't popped up? So let me have a look. Is it showing now?
No, not yet. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Is it there?
Yep. Okay,
cool. So I've got my Photoshop here, and then I might have this diagram, and then if I go to my library, and I'll have the I've got a lot of folders, and then demo is the folder that I save all my stuff to, and you can see all the stuff that I've captured now is available in that folder, and I can actually use it. So the looks that I apply, the looks that I like, for the image. Now if I click on it, and I can apply that same look onto my diagram, my image itself. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Is there a bit of a lagging? So if I like the blue one, I might click the blue one, and then if I like the pink one, I might like the pink one. So it depends on your taste. So you might want to have a sunset view, and you might have a morning, early sunrise view, depending on the feel you want. And then obviously, if you look at the layers, you'll see it's been created a effect layer, for you on top of it. And that's actually quite cool, to use to make the image look interesting. And then, I've got those, the graphics that I took the shapes, the trees. Obviously, I can just, drag and drop over onto the image. And then I can, put it in within the, in the image. This is a color version, of course, right? But it doesn't have to be colored. I saw some of the examples, images that you've given us it's, just black or white. Looks like, you sketch on it. So you can just put this in as well. And to make your diagram or image looks more creative or more, let's say, see, how you want to position it in your portfolio, in your, how you want to display it into your customers or clients in your architecture environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's actually very easy, right? So I'm not showing you anything that you have to do manually. You just have to capture the things you want to put into image, and you can do it. Similarly, this image here, like, you'll create stuff like this, and I can make them look, totally different, like very different, just by a click of button, and then drag and drop things that I clicked it from the my capture camera. And because those captures are vector diagrams, so you can enlarge or resize them as you wish, and it will not lose its quality. Okay. And that's it from me for capture to start you off with, and I'll pass it on to Steve.
James, is there just a quick question? Yeah. Do you have to use Adobe Capture to get this sort of effect with the color gradient plus the trees?
You don't have to use it, but there's a one way to do it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
No, this is not. You don't have to use it. I mean, like Steve said earlier, there's many ways to make things look the things that you want to look. This is a quick. If you wanted to, using capture things that's realistic in your life, you walk around, what you see, what do you want to build into, you just take a picture and then put it in. Yeah, that's it. Now let me just share some comments. Will capture work on try insert person. So if you take a picture of a person, and you can, it will be a vector diagram, you can drag and drop a person onto a diagram as well. Yeah, this capture. Oh, actually, I forgot to show you one more thing about capture. It does capture do brushes as well, so you can import brush as well. And yes, it works for Illustrator. It works for majority of the programs. So capture is basically something that feeds into majority of our applications, Illustrator or the others. Yeah, you can use it in Vector for sure. That's what people use. And then Fresco, another mobile app, that mobile tablet drawing app that we have, you could import to that as well. Anything else? Yeah, that's it. Okay, Steve.
Cool. I think I'll take over and now jump into more of the sort of traditional sort of Photoshop things. I think, that's a really valuable way to show that a lot of our companion apps are starting to move into, that area of creativity everywhere. So, you've got your phone everywhere, and you just see something that you really like, and you want to incorporate it into your projects. It's a really valid way to do it. Us traditionalists always think, oh no, I've got to have everything here in my computer, but it's not necessarily the case. So I wanted to cover a few things that, some people might think are fairly basic, but not everybody knows everything about a great application like Photoshop. It's been around for quite some time, and you kind of assume that people understand what it's all about, but you just never know. So, there's a couple of things that I always like to do, irrespective of the image that I've got. So, there's a stack of things that are important in Photoshop, but there's things again that help me to work with it. And one of the key things that I like to do is to ensure that the documents I'm working on, I work on them non-destructively. So in order to make something into a layer, you can just double click and make it a layer. The reason I do that is that I want to do a couple of quick things with this. I want to actually convert this for smart filters, or I could just make this layer a smart object straight off. So convert to smart object. What converting to smart object means in Photoshop is that it's kind of embedding a Photoshop version of a document inside a document. And once I've done that, if I double click on this this thumbnail here, what opens up is the layer name .psb. PSB is Photoshop Big. I don't know why they chose the Photoshop Big format, but that's what they did. And it's actually the file within the file. So if I just close that off, you'll see nothing actually changes on my screen. But it has actually allowed me to start working on this file non-destructively, because one of the first things I'll often do with an image is actually adjust things like levels and click on, say, auto levels. And changing the auto levels actually doesn't look terrific on my screen here, but it's something that I might start off with. By doing levels normally on an image, that's actually destructive, but you'll see over here in my layers panel that it's added smart filters automatically to my image, so that I can actually see the effect that that auto levels has given to my document automatically. So I can always go backwards, and it's a completely non-destructive way of working. The main reason why I've opened up this particular image is that, again, something that not everyone necessarily knows. Everyone knows about the crop tool in Photoshop, but not everyone necessarily knows about the perspective crop tool. Perspective crop tool allows me to choose, actually, no, I have to do this. I should have done the crop first, so I'm just going to go back a couple of steps. The perspective crop tool allows me to choose the actual way that I crop this file, and I'll just pop that crop around about there and around about there, and just align some of the edges of the straightening of the building, so that when I do commit this crop, oh, I completely stuffed that up. Try that again. So perspective crop, try again. Don't know why everything seems to be just a little bit skewy for me today. And I'll pop that over there. And I'll pop that over there. And I'll have to move my screen just a little bit down and click the OK. And there, it's actually done a crop and straighten for me. So nice thing to know that when you do want to give the impression of buildings having been straightened, if that's what you're actually after in your job, then this perspective crop tool actually does that job for us. So it's a quick and easy way to do that perception of straightening objects. So in looking at some of those sample files that we had, there was a number of interesting concepts that were being addressed there. So we've got lots of, Jane showed some of the ways that we might bring, the concept of those trees and other elements and the colorizing, etc., into Photoshop. So I wanted to address some of those because one of the strange things about Photoshop itself is that you don't necessarily have to have a photo to actually kick off the creative process. So I've just opened up a blank screen here, and I'm going to start working on a few things that I might use as a background to my images. And so one of the things that, I want essentially two types of images. And in doing this, I'll cover a couple of those concepts of working non-destructively, some smart filters, some other elements, but also things like masking, which is very important inside Photoshop. So first thing I want to do is actually make sure I've got, pardon me, my colors. If I sort of highlight over the left of my screen here, you can see I've got my foreground is black and background is white. And I'm just going to paint black all over the top of my screen. And I do that by holding down Alt or Option Delete. So Command Delete actually paints the background color, and Alt Delete or Option Delete will paint the background color all over this background. And so this is a bit of a trick that I learnt from Dr. Russell Brown. So what I want to do in this case is actually do a couple of interesting little effects here. And I'm going to add noise to my image. And the noise that we can actually set how much noise is actually applied to this. So I can bump this up quite a bit. And you think, Steve, where exactly are we going with all this? It's looking a little bit odd. And then the next thing I want to do is actually add a little bit of a Gaussian blur to this as well. So if I pop into Gaussian blur, it'll actually blur the noise that I created, making it a little bit more rounded. You can see that in the effects here that we've actually rounded off that noise. It often, when you add noise to something, it makes it quite square pixeled. And again, where am I going with this? I'm going to do my trick again with levels. And I want to pop into command. I usually just go straight to the keyboards, but I'm going through the menus here. If I pop into levels, I can make an adjustment to how these various parts of this image are actually appearing. And what you can see here is that suddenly, out of nowhere, I'm getting a bit of a night sky actually happening. So again, I don't necessarily have to have a camera to work in Photoshop to create an interesting effect. And so depending on how starry I actually want this to be, I just play around with those levels until I actually get that correct. Now, you notice when I went back into levels, the adjustments weren't actually how I would like them. They're how I last used them. What I should have done was actually made this again into a smart object and then done levels from here. So if I do that, which is a much smarter way of doing this process, in fact, I can just drag this over, the black point over. It means that I can come back and forth to my smart filters and make adjustments to it depending on how many stars I actually want in the sky. So now that's a good starting point, but if I wanted to take this just a little bit further, what I can do is actually duplicate this layer and take all those effects, but this time add a bit of a motion blur. So the whole idea of the motion blur in this case is just giving us a little bit of sideways movement of the pixels. And on this top layer, then we'd do something like overlay. And you get a bit of a twinkling effect. So I'd have the motion blur going one way and then duplicate this again and again, because these are duplicate layer, or because these are using smart layers, I can pop into my motion blur and turn that sideways. And I've got things going up and things going down, and the overlay actually happening through on my image. It's a little hard to see, but you actually get a little bit of a twinkling effect of the night sky. So that's one really cool background that I might actually want to apply to some of my images. So that's one. Next, I want to actually create. I'm just going to create a new document. Oops. Everything's popping up on my other screen, so all the effects and etc. Are popping on the new screen. So the next one I want to do is actually create a sky that has some clouds in that sky. So first up, I'm just going to grab my gradient tool and have a look at some of the options that I have in gradient. So normally when I open it up, it just pops up like this, and I've got all these blues that I can sort of roll down. And one of these blues will do the best possible job for me. So I'll just see how this one actually works as a gradient. It's not too bad. Again, you can always pop into the actual gradient itself if you want to adjust it. And so, oh, again, it's popped right over on my other screen. So maybe the bottom location of this needs to be a little bit lighter and brighter. So not too bad. Yeah, well, it's probably not quite what we're looking for. So that's a starting point for my sky. So again, I do want to make this non-destructive, so I'll just make it a layer. So the next thing that I want to do over the top of this, in fact, I'll put this on a separate layer, is render some clouds. And you go, what? What is this strangeness? So again, I go into render and there's this thing called clouds. And you go, well, that doesn't look anything like clouds at all. It doesn't have the effect that I'm looking for, surely. But what Photoshop does do extensively is that you can never look at something just as it is. We can always apply these different blend modes to everything that we have in Photoshop. So if we just skim over some of these different options, suddenly we'll find something that is absolutely perfect for our cloud effect. So if I just skim through, you'll find that the ones that we probably like is something like screen. That one works absolutely beautifully. And again, I can apply various effects to that. So something like levels, so that the midpoint of the grays of the previous concepts sort of blend away. And again, because this is on a separate layer, you know, I can do things like transform this. So I'm just going to do a bit of a free transform on this and bring the clouds up a little bit. But again, that's not quite what I want. I don't want it quite like that. I actually want it sort of blending downwards so that there's less clouds down the bottom. So what I do then is actually apply a mask. So the concept of a mask is that I want certain things appearing on the, going through to the background and other things not. So if I just add this layer mask, it actually adds a mask of white, which means that all the light is actually coming through. If I add elements of color or black and white, for example, I'll get a blending of the various aspects here. So I'm going to pop into our basic gradients here and click out. So I've just got our standard gradient and making sure I've got that layer mask actually selected. I'm just going to draw probably even a little bit further up. I'm going to draw a gradient from a bottom to top. And there we can see that we're starting to get something that approaches, you know, a cloudy sky. So again, we'd mess around with some of the options to get to the absolute perfect option, but that's a really great process of actually building that out. The other way that I can add some clouds to my sky is actually using brushes. So grabbing the brush tool and having a look at some of the options that I have for brushes. I've got enormous amounts of brushes that are available to me and that create some of these sorts of effects that I'm looking for. So, you know, I've got all these Kyle's splatter brushes that might be absolutely perfect for what I'm looking for. So making sure that I'm painting with the appropriate color for this. In fact, I'll just bring up my layers again so that I'll just add another layer because I want to be painting the color of white over the top. So, and I can use my square brackets on my keyboard to make this brush bigger, or I can actually just pump it up here in the brush options. You can see some of the various effects that I can apply to this. But, you know, I can just click in various spots, or I can click and drag to create that effect that I'm looking for. And again, maybe drop things down a bit with levels so that it's not quite so crazy. And probably even mess the opacity a bit so it's blending a bit into the background. So again, messing around, finding the right brush that is absolutely perfect is a great way to create the effects that you're looking for. So again, I'm in Photoshop, but I haven't actually worked with a photograph at all. I'm actually essentially painting with everything that I've got here. One of the things that I have access to in my brushes that if you saw them when they popped up, I've got lots and lots of brushes. I've got bird brushes. And you go, what? Again, crazy. What I've done is actually, I did a quick search on Google and said, I want Photoshop bird brushes, as simple as that. And I went to import these brushes, and in my downloads, again, it's just on my other screen here, I imported all the bird brushes. Since I've already done it, we can see some of the types of bird brushes that are here. So here's some birds added to this, this sky for interesting effect. Again, I can use some different colors to get the adjustments that I'm looking for. But very, very easy to, and there's some really interesting ones here that, could be very large, and even to the point, they've got telegraph poles, etc. as well. So, lots of interesting brushes that somebody has spent all that time actually putting together. So bird brushes. Okay, so I've got
here. You can create your own brushes through Capture. So I forgot to show you, but have a look at Capture to create your own brushes. You can take pictures of birds as well, and then make into some brushes yourself.
It's so cool. The options are endless, aren't they? Okay, so I've got my various backdrops. I've got my shiny sky there, but I do need some areas of grass, for example. So perhaps in this case, I'm going to add another layer, and on this layer, I'm going to add a pattern overlay. And so the pattern overlays also include things like grass. So if I click OK, and I should have actually painted with a color to begin with, you can see there I've got grass. And if I pop into the options for that pattern overlay, you can see you can adjust the size and the effect. And again, if I did want to, I can just add layer masks to this, and I can just create a blend that goes, I always go the wrong way first up. So forward to backwards to create that style of effect. That's kind of where I'm trying to get to. So again, I haven't got anything in this image that is a photograph at all, but it's got all the elements that I might want to actually create that that effect that some of these issues have in these examples. Okay, so next along, what I want to do is actually use Adobe Illustrator just momentarily, because I've got this great, well, when I say great, you'll look at it and go, it looks silly, but I've got this Illustrator Artwork, and so here it actually is inside Illustrator. It's got some various additional elements that I might want to add to my artwork. So just as an example, I've got a window here, and what I've done to this piece of artwork is actually worked with a perspective grid. It's already set for this, and I think Brian was going to look at this a little bit more. He might go into a little detail if we've got time later, but I've got this window that I want to add to my Illustrator drawing, and I might want to come back to this a little bit later, but there's my artwork and my perspective grid that I've done inside Illustrator that I want to incorporate into that scene that we've created. So I'm just going to save that and pop back into Photoshop, sorry. So Photoshop allows me to actually import either embedded or linked either one can work quite nicely for us. So I'm going to place embedded that Illustrator file. So there's the Illustrator file, there's the perspective, and it's going, because it's a multi-page Illustrator file, it's going to give me the option for which page I actually want to bring in. And there's that Illustrator file. So great starting point. Now, something that you may not know about work, when you do place an Illustrator file into Photoshop, it's kind of like a link. So if I do double click on it, we've been talking about non-destructive working between applications. If I do double click on this element, it actually opens it up inside Illustrator, and there's the Illustrator file that's embedded inside the Photoshop file. It's specifically not the original file that I had open. It is, in fact, another version of it sitting inside Illustrator. So, sorry, inside Photoshop. So I'll close that off, and we can see that if I do double click, click OK, and you'll see that it opens up here inside inside Illustrator. And then I can do things like, you know, add another, let's see, might zoom in a little bit and use my perspective grid tool to, let's just duplicate that. So I want another window, close that off. Back into Photoshop, and there's that updated Photoshop file. So again, it doesn't look absolutely perfect. I do need, well, it doesn't look even remotely perfect. And I do want to talk a little bit after a while. There's another concept that I wanted to bring into some of the Adobe applications that you may not know, but I want to use one of the filters and effects that Photoshop also has that can help us out here in interesting ways. I actually want to add a drop shadow to this layer. So, you know, I haven't, I've messed around with a little bit, you know, so there's the drop shadow, the spread and the size and the other things. In fact, I might just turn off visibility of these other layers a little bit, just so that we can actually see this drop shadow. So there's our drop shadow. And yeah, it's not, maybe we want it to be a little bit more intense just so we can see it. So the drop shadow is coming from that Illustrator file. So just so that you know, you can actually separate that out and create a layer from that drop shadow. So what I've got there is actually a drop shadow that I can start messing with. So while at the moment it's not as if it's a drop shadow for a flat object. So what I need to actually do is start messing with it as if it's part of a shadow coming from light. So let's just put some of the visibility of these other layers back up. And I'm just going to select just that shadow itself and do some transforming of it. So I'm going to do some transform. Some options that I have for transform include things like switch between free transform and warp modes, you know, because what I want to actually do is actually flip this shadow around so that it's actually more like it's actually being generated from the actual object itself. And, you know, again, I always do this, but I should have done this before I started all this messing around with it. I should have made this a smart object, because once I've committed the change to this particular shadow, I need to be able to pull it back and probably mess with it a little bit more, because once you've made a change to destructive layers inside Photoshop, you're going to be stretching out pixels, and that's not necessarily the kind of effect that we're actually looking for. So I'm just going to drag this out a little bit, and commit that. The next transform I actually want to do is actually a bit of a skew, so that you know, it actually makes it look like it's spreading that shadow out. So it gives you a bit of an idea of that. Again, the concept of a drop shadow in Photoshop is more for, you know, creative effects of type and other things, but we can apply it to other elements in our projects as well. So the perfectionist in me just wants to move that around and perhaps make it a little bit better. Now, going back to some of our projects previously, they had some interesting sort of colorizing effects. And, you know, I did play with this in various different ways. And I wanted to see, you know, just from standard trees that actually sit in my backyard. I'm lucky enough to live in the Blue Mountains. So, you know, I've got this kind of view heading out the back. I wanted to see what sort of effects that I should apply to something like this image to get, you know, similar sorts of effects. Now, you've seen Jane grab Capture, which is actually a really, really good way to apply this. But let's work in Photoshop in a non-destructive way. So I've already made this a smart object. Let's have a look at a few different filters and effects that we can apply to this. So one possibility is to add something like a color overlay to our image. So this color overlay will actually affect the entirety of this image. So this gives us that sort of disgusting, something I'm kind of familiar with, look and feel of bushfires. But you know, we can sort of drop that down a little bit, give us a bit of a sepia tone type effect. So we can turn that on and off, and even if we add a layer mask to that, so add the effect to only parts of the image that we're actually looking at. So that's one colorizing effect. The other thing that we might want to have a look at is some of the fun filters that we could apply from our filter gallery. As an example, the filter gallery actually helps us out a lot in that it gives us some a preview of the way that the image might actually appear. So, you know, if I do click on, say, graphic pen or charcoal, it gives us the effect that will actually appear on our image. And we can actually layer multiple effects together. So if we start off with, say, artistic and colored pencil, that's not so much fun. Bas relief, you know, it's coming to the sorts of things that might actually come close. And we can always invert the look and feel if it's not quite what we're looking at. We actually want to inverse that altogether. So let's just zoom back a little bit so we can see a little bit more of the trees. So that might be okay, just as a starting effect. And then we can actually, you know, invert all the colors if we so wish, and perhaps even work with something that is a different mode altogether. But again, that's actually quite a, if we turn off the color overlay, that's an interesting effect that again we might apply to various elements of our different projects. Pardon me. So again, Photoshop's, you know, it's a really interesting creative tool. We've got, you know, skies that we've created. We've got grounds that we've added around various elements, and we can always put our night sky into the backgrounds instead of having the actual sky. So, you know, if I come here and select my night sky and maybe paste that into that area and turn off our clouds, you know, we've got, you know, we've still got some clouds there from a different layer. So we've got really interesting effects that we can apply nice and quickly. Okay, so I've gone through the concept of working with various layers. One thing that I did want to briefly talk through with some of the objects as well is that when you do have multiple layer effects like this, and perhaps you've got clouds appearing, you might not want them necessarily to appear all the way through. If you want an effect to only affect one layer down, if you hold down the Alt or Option key in between layers, you can actually have them, and we can see just that that point there that the perspective drop shadow doesn't appear through because of it. I've essentially hidden it underneath my effect layer there. So what it can do is ensure that the effect that we're working on only applies to the layer below. So in that case, it didn't step down to my grassy layer there, so it never shows up. So layering one object over the other is part of the process of having those various interesting creative effects that we're actually looking for. So there's a starry night with some interesting clouds. Okay. Oh, been talking through all of those. I might just stop for a moment and just hand over to Brian, who's going to look at a few vanishing points.
Thank you, Steve. And let me turn on my camera as well. Okay, great. I think what Steve's shown is amazing stuff about how we could create the environment for the objects there. And Steve was using Photoshop, effects, filters. Steve was showing us illustration with Illustrator as well, right? And then Illustrator can be brought into Photoshop, right? What I might do is share my screen and just make sure that I got the right screen. And then I'm going to share the main screen. Okay, this is it. Okay, all right. So hopefully you can see my computer screen. I'll just pop it up here. Right? And let's have a look what we could do further, right? And the perspective grid in Illustrator is very interesting because it helps us draw with the perspective, right? And when it comes to Photoshop, we don't really draw, but then we still need to very often edit photos with perspective as well, right? So here I've got this, maybe this building that I want to edit. And imagine if I want to edit this building, let's just say I want to clone a window, then I want to make sure that if I clone it, I can't just clone it like 2D, I need to clone it with the perspective as well. If I want to put graphics or logos in the building, I need to, can't just paste. For example, if I've got this graphics there, I can't just paste it there, I need to paste it with the proper perspective as well. Right? First of all, let me, while we are here, may as well just let me copy this graphic. And I'll show you a technique about how we could edit a photo with perspective. Right? So the way to do it, just like Steve was saying, non-destructively, is that I'm going to create a new layer on top of this, right? So that we do everything on the new layer. And then I'm going to go to filter. Steve has already shown us a couple of those filters there, but there's one filter called Vanishing Point. And when it comes to Vanishing Point, it displays in this vanishing grid. The first thing, we still have to teach Photoshop where are the planes, right? So this is where you use the grid tool, and then you basically draw your plane. So I'm going to just grab it here, grab it there, and then maybe grab it somewhere here. You know, you don't, maybe I'll just go and grab one here, go and grab one there. Right? So kind of like, when I feel that they are kind of like in the right perspective, then I've got this grid. I could, of course, expand it further. And maybe just so I could expand it further. If I want to, I could even scale it up as well. Right? Now, we could continue. If I just add it here, then you just expand it, right? So we don't want that. I want to create another plane. So all I need to do is hold down the Control key, and then I can create a plane there. And indeed, I think let's not add the plane yet, right? So let me just go back to select this plane, and maybe I'll just add the plane here. And no, this one, the grid will be like this and like that. So as you can see, I've now got multiple planes, right? So because once you've got multiple planes, the things will be quite interesting. First of all, I might just add it more, add the plane up, and then also on this plane, add the plane up as well. So why do I do that? It means that I can, if I really want to, I'll tell you some of the things that we could do, right? If I select this window, what you see is that when you select, it select based on the perspective, right? And suddenly you could do a lot of things. For example, you could basically just add another window, right? If you want to, and they fall into the perspective as well. Now, if I just want to add a new floor, I can actually do so. Maybe this is a layer. But I can simply hold down the Alt key, and then I can just literally create another floor, just like that. And then, of course, we could do so as well, maybe on this layer. And I may just let's say, so I'm just going here, and then I might just use the selection key, select the marquee, and then use the Alt key. I could just bring another layer on top, right? So just like that. So suddenly with the perspective grid, there, it makes it very easy for you to kind of like draw with the perspective. I think I just didn't do a pretty good job there. So let me just try again, because I really want to. Let me just select the bit that include the top, right? Because that's what I want. Okay, I'll try it one more time, and now I'm going to draw include the top green bit as well. So now that looks better now. So I've got kind of like using a perspective grid, make it super easy for me to kind of like create another floor if I want to. Right. Now, remember that I have this image, right, that I copy, right, and I could also paste the image as well, right. And this image is pretty big. Let me just make it smaller, right. So hold down the Shift key because I want it to be maintaining the proper perspective there. You say that this is a 2D image there, but because we've got the grid, if I just bring it there, let me just make it bigger, and maybe just make it bigger as well. So you see that suddenly I could add things that are based on the perspective, or if I could do it, I could of course bring it into this layer as well. Oh, yeah, I just maybe just undo it. Maybe I'll just do on this layer, but I think there's something not quite. The plane isn't quite. The graphics there, you see some artifacts there. Don't worry, it's just my graphics card. Isn't, I suppose, isn't working very well. So there's some artifacts, but when I refresh this page, it will be disappear, right? And if I click OK, a little bit artifacts doesn't matter if I refresh this. Oh, still coming up. So there's some artifacts there. For some reason, it's not displaying too well. But if I zoom in a little bit there, let's just ignore this artifact for the time being, right? I'm going to do a bit of blend mode as well, just like what Steve was showing us, right? So if I put, this graphic I should put onto a new layer. I actually should at the moment, right? Because I put this graphic onto this same layer, and blend mode wouldn't work very well. But I'll just give you. Hang on, just don't know whether I should do. Maybe I'm not going to try it now. What I should have done is create a new layer, put the graphics on a new layer instead of just put the graphic on this new floor as well. You see, I put the graphic on this new floor, which is not the way to do it. I should have created a new layer, put the graphic onto a new layer, and then I would be using blend mode. But for pardon me, I forgot to create a new layer there. I will skip talking about non-destructive editing, but I just should add another layer there. But hopefully you get an idea about how you could use the vanishing point to help you with working with architectures that has perspective as well. And very often it's not just with architecture, even with these sort of a drawing, paint photo, right? Same thing, right? It will be, because you see that it is a photo with perspective, you could also use the same technique about perspective grid to help you do editing. For example, let's just say there's this tool. If you want to duplicate another tool somewhere there, you wouldn't be just using the clone tool somewhere here. You wouldn't just use the clone tool to clone it there, because number one, the perspective isn't there. It should be smaller, and you better be very careful about these grid line as well, right? So same thing, I usually create a new layer, and same before, you will create a vanishing pole. And in this case, again, you would create a little grid. Right? So for example, like this, like that, like it here, right? So create a little grid, make it wider if you want to, make it wider if you want to, right? And now if you clone, it's very different, because that if I, for those who use clone tool before, you know that first of all, you hold down the Alt key, and then you select the clone source. Right. And once you got the clone source there, then this is where you could start to align whether, if you just clone somewhere else, you see that there's obviously a problem. Even though it falls into perspective, but that the alignment isn't quite right, right? Undo it, right? This is where you would want to so I'll do the select again, right? And you want to align it properly so that they fall into same perspective, right? Just like that. Right. And of course, I mean, if you really want to do further, you will see, you know that this picture, because it's going to blur the further away from the front, right? So, but this is fine, because what we have is that we have created a new layer. All I need to do is to, on this layer, later on, I'll just apply a Gaussian blur, and so that to match the blurriness around this area, right? Similarly, if you want to remove this tool there, then you don't want to clone from there. You want to clone somewhere in the same distance. Why? Because then you would make sure that the focus area is the same, right? So for example, in this case, I just hold down the Alt key around this plane area, right? And now you simply match, so that you match the wood, right? And suddenly, I've also cloned a little bit there as well. That's fine. I will just go back here, right? So clone a little bit, just like that, right? Click OK. Now, because everything was, non-destructive, you simply go to this layer. You can turn on, turn off, right? If I zoom in 100%, And you start to realize that, well, you know, this is much sharper than this area, Why? Because I was cloning the object that are closer to the lens, right? But this is fine because we do it with a new layer. All you need to do is just create a Gaussian blur, or indeed, I would actually make it as a smart object as well. But in the interest of time, I'll just do that. And then I could just match the blur from here to everywhere around, right? And then you just match it around. When this is about this size, that's okay. Then zoom out a little bit. So this is how you could make use of the vanishing point to edit your photo, especially whenever the photo have a very clear perspective for you to work with. Right. I think I might just stop this screen sharing and give it back to Steve to continue with the next application. Steve, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. That's awesome. I love Vanishing Point. It's fantastic. Okay, so make sure I'm sharing the right screen again. And I did forget something. I always forget something that I'd seen that sometimes you just forget all the fantastic things that are in Photoshop. But one of the options that you can do that will be useful, I'm sure, in the projects that I've seen samples of, is that in Photoshop you can render a tree. And there's all sorts of trees that we can actually use. So there's a young robinia, so maybe an oak wood might be what we want. And you can see that you can start messing around with the amount of leaves and all of those sorts of things, and then render an actual tree onto your project and make that a little bit smaller, you know, and pop it over there. You know, that's looking pretty good. So I'll apply that and save that. So one thing that I did want to very, very briefly just go through before we just open up to questions is actually using, if you do have the subscription to the Creative Cloud, you've got access to Adobe Dimension. And Adobe Dimension just makes some of the things that you'll do so much easier. I'll show this really, really rapidly. But we have access to a whole series of starter assets and other bits and pieces that can help you out in your project. But you can also add content from your computer. So I'm going to add a 3D model that I brought from, let's see, Creative Cloud Files. I brought in from SketchUp. And it's just here in there. And here's the 3D model. It just pops in so we can actually see that. And then we can bring in our awesome, let's see, import my content, images background. We can see the image that we brought in. So there's my tree and all the other elements. You can see that it's not quite in the right spot, but one of the really cool things with Adobe Dimension is that it does this really clever thing where it matches light and all the other elements to a background. Because this doesn't really have a good plane to actually work with, we might have to do a little bit of adjustments of the actual 3D file to make it work nicely into this scene. But you get the idea. It's a really easy way to actually grab your this one's a, well, what was that file format again? It is a .skp file from SketchUp, and really, really easy to actually add elements. So one of the ones that I often use is actually just an image of a kitchen, because this shows this concept really, really well. That Adobe Dimension just allows us to take 3D objects and then apply them to existing backgrounds. So again, I can just click on my background and just do this amazing match 3D object to background. So this is just popping it anywhere. So this model itself, I do want the bottle to have, to be glass. That's cool. And on that bottle, I might actually use in my library one of the logos that I created myself inside Illustrator. And there we can see really, really rapidly taking 3D objects. So the type of formats that you can bring into Dimension is all the common 3D formats. Then you can match it to your own image. And as I did with the background, it didn't really have a good plane to work with, but you know, Adobe Dimension is a great way to work with your existing 3D objects, putting it into a photograph that you have and matching it to that background and creating really, really realistic models in a very quick space of time. So I just really needed to show Adobe Dimension. It's well worth having a look at, just to see if it can actually do the thing that you're looking for in a rapid way. So I might just stop sharing now and just hand over back to Charles and see if there's any questions that we may want to answer.
Steve, before that, did you want to go through the take-home challenge?
Yeah, I think Anna, is that okay if you run through that?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jane, have you got the, are you able to share the slide that I created about the Take It Home challenge?
Yes.
I'll talk through it if you can share it.
Yeah.
So guys, hope you enjoyed that session and hope that was valuable for you guys. We thought, you know, for something fun, we'd like to share a Take It Home challenge with you. So I'll just wait for it to come on screen, but essentially, you know, we want you to take away what you've learnt today and apply it, and show us something that you've created using the techniques that Brian, Steve and Jane showed you today. So there are some requirements. The file needs to be in a PSD format. When you do submit your file, please save it under your name so we can track who it belongs to. Charles can share the actual link with you, the hyperlink, but we'd like you to upload it into one of our Creative Cloud libraries, so it's in a central area. And we've got 2 weeks for you to complete that submission. So hopefully that's enough time for you to work on it and submit. And we do have some incentives. So first prize is a $50 gift card from the faculty from UNSW, which is great. Second prize, some Adobe merch, so an Adobe drink bottle and cap. And third prize will be an Adobe reusable coffee cup. So I hope that's something fun for you guys to do. We'd love to see some of the artwork that you come up with. So yeah, please reach out if you have any questions, but I'll get Charles to share this with you post this session today.
So thanks, Anna. So that, I'll make sure that all this information is passed on to you guys who's with us today. I guess for the final 10 minutes, is there any questions that you'd like to ask these Adobe experts while they're here? Just anyone? Just in the Zoom chat box?
Maybe we sent everyone to sleep, Charles.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I kind of missed out half of the meeting.
We did record it, so.
Oh, okay, thank God. Yeah, because like I had trouble accessing.
It's all right, it's recorded.
Oh yeah, all right, okay. So, thanks.
so
would you
there's-
send it to me if that's all right?
Yeah, no worries. It'll be sent to everyone.
Yeah. Thanks.
Kelvin,
I'll drop my email. Yep.
Sorry. Kelvin's question, would those changes on separate Photoshop file created from changing a layer into Smart Object? So if you make changes to the original Photoshop file that you embedded into Photoshop, it doesn't go through. But if you make changes to the embedded file, yeah, it does go through. So essentially you're making a copy of the file. It's not like a link, but you can link another file as well. So there was two options in Photoshop, embed linked file and place linked file and place embedded file. So link will link back to the original. Embedded will just keep a version of the document inside the document, if that makes sense.
Any more questions? Steve? Oh wait, sorry, no question from Sally. Steve?
So if you import an embedded version, the original file is separate. So it stays separate. It's not linked to it in any way, shape or form. But essentially there was those two options, place embedded, place linked. So linked means that you'll be able to update to the original file. But if you place embedded, it creates a copy of it and places it inside your new version of the document. So it is separate to the original. Cool. Best way to figure it out is to actually try it and see how it actually works. The two different ways of doing it.
Steve, I've got a question.
Sure.
So, is there any advice you'd give to perhaps graphic design enthusiasts? Because we have a lot of design-oriented people here. So, what would you might say to them, career-wise?
Career-wise, oh no, that's an interesting thing. Give it up, don't do it. Isn't that what they say about actors and things? Career-wise for graphic design, I think I went a completely odd way because I started back in the 90s, so things were a bit different back then. There was no great courses for a lot of the things that we were doing, but one thing I did start off doing a lot of is freelance work. So going along to a consultant and just doing absolutely anything that people shot my way and learning as much as I could from all the people on the way through. But, certainly embedding yourself in all the different technologies, being really open to trying things with just about every application, and being across all the different outputs that are possible, whether that's web, print, mobile, video, really being across all of those things is really cool. So, also, just, that concept of freelancing was a great way to get knowledge across a really broad range of industries, so that different styles of work was something that I found very valuable.
And is there like a starting step if you were to recommend it?
A starting step? Well, having passion for design is a good starting step. So apart from doing the right sort of courses, for me it was a little bit different back in the day, but another thing that you can do is there's so many small businesses running around these days that need social media, so just sometimes walking into a bunch of the local businesses that might not be right up to date on social media, that seems to be a great way to jump into creating campaigns for people using great design, whether that be through Instagram or Facebook or however those different campaigns can do. So that's actually something a lot of people are doing now. So I think be open to doing just about anything, whether it's e-learning or creating little short form videos for people, and just being across all the applications that can do all those things.
Yeah, and I
I
guess,
feel, yeah,
sorry?
and I
Oh,
feel
sorry, keep going.
that we've got the Adobe Behance network, right? And very often the fact is that people need to know you, and you know, how do people know you? So there needs to be some sort of platform for the world to know you, and Behance is kind of like the LinkedIn, in the sense that LinkedIn is more like the general career, whereas Behance is really more like the creative network. And I think if I were a student, no, I'm no longer a student.
Still learning.
Not so much, right? But
Yeah.
if I started all over again, I would absolutely make use of the social media network like LinkedIn or Instagram or YouTube, more so with LinkedIn and Behance. These two network, I absolutely will spend the most of time to make sure that the world knows about me.
Just wanted to add, I think Instagram is really big these days to get, if you want to crack into design industry, it's good to create a professional or, you know, self-brand profile. Don't use your, you know, personal ones, and then consistently posting things that you think, you know, think about employer or people want to hire, what sort of work they're looking for, you know, tailored to a specific angle. So in a photo companies or people that you want to work for, so make sure that you all the content you create is consistent to your image, and that's very important, because when they look at your post, you know, if you wanted to have a let's say a fashion designer, you know, a stylist job, you don't want it to look, you know, like dirty room, like bedroom, or like looking just right on bed. Like the sort of images is just not the way to go. You just make sure you have a professional brand even on your social media platform. For design, especially for design and creative, it's a very competitive market out there, and the majority of work for designers are freelance, to be honest. So, and you want people, you know, when you gain followers and stuff, then that's when you and people will come to you and then, you know, have project for you and so on. So you have to find your niche. That's the market's crowded, right? You could find your niche. What's your interest? What's your angle? Why are you special? And that's what I think is very important these days. And look at talking about Instagram posts, I suggest everyone to look at our other product called Adobe Spark. Adobe Spark is very good for creating professional looking, beautiful looking posts that does not, you know, take a lot of time. It's really quick. You do it on your mobile. Just make everything looks better, because not everyone's a professional photographer, right? And you're not going to have a lot of time to think about what you're going to post, how you're going to make that look, but you can, but this app is going to make your post looks way better than what you would do with your Instagram account right now, I imagine. Yeah. Cool. That's it.
Spark over Lightroom. That's an interesting question. Lightroom's actually Adobe Spark. I do recommend just popping in and having a look at it, because Spark is great for creating quick web pages and, as Jane mentioned, Instagram posts. Lightroom is a way to organize and coordinate photographs. So it's the professional tools, professional photographer's tool for processing thousands of images in a go, and putting metadata onto them, and doing quick searches and things like that. So Lightroom is tremendous. And in fact, Lightroom works beautifully into Spark, because you can access your Lightroom images in Spark itself.
Yeah, so Lightroom and Spark very, very different. If you look at Spark, Spark is not a photo editing tool, right? Spark is for putting, you know, photos that you've done editing in Lightroom and put them together in a beautiful collage, or in a beautiful post, or in a beautiful designed, you know, branded or post that you can post onto the website. So adding text, adding, you know, effects, animation onto your post. That's what Spark's for. It's a very two different use case for the product.
There is one, I want to go back on that last point. So is there particular skills that you recommend to people breaking into the creative design industry? Just you three? Like, do you have to be a master at Photoshop or Illustrator or design?
No, you find your own niche, right? Like I said, you find because our product right now, these days, if you look at Photoshop, Illustrator, and design, these are, products being out there for 20, 30 years, right? A lot of people are very, doing courses and so on, but the direction we're going also is making things easier for people to use. It's not about what tools you use, it's about what's the end result you want to create. There's a million ways to achieve the same result. So you think about what you want to do. Some people like to do black and white photography, and they'll focus on that. Some people like to do, design, like animation, that sort of stuff. You focus on that. So it's finding your niche, and then think about, and then find out, okay, what's the best way to create that, end results that you wanted to provide. Like sometimes just, some people, even photographers, you look at it around, there's all different styles, right? But they might be using the same tool, or they might be using, it's just really asking yourself, what's your area of passion or interest? What do you want to do?
But certainly being across all the applications is good, because just as an example, people that are creating signs are more likely to use Illustrator, but there's no reason why you can't use InDesign as well, depending on the effect that you're looking for. And of course, you would work Photoshop into those two applications, but you don't work exclusively in one. So being multi-talented across multiple applications is really important, but also knowing when to use the right application for the right output. That's really key.
So I guess we'll just wrap it up here. I'll make sure that all the information plus the take-home challenge and all the information is passed on to you guys, the participants in our Zoom call. And I'd also like to thank Brian, Jane, and also Steve, the Adobe Solution Consultants, plus Anna as well, for being with us today. So thank you you four.
Thanks, Charles, for organizing it.
Thank you.
And thanks for everyone for participating. We'll be in touch.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, thanks.
Thanks, guys.